Well, hey everyone, you have been gaslit into believing that you are going to be on these antidepressants forever. This is now a 3-part episode. Was supposed to be 2, but guess
You were
what?
gaslit into believing it was only 2 parts when it's really gonna be
We
3.
lied. We
We
lied. So now
lied.
it's a 3-part episode, and we're going to talk to you about how to taper your medications. And we are your whistleblowing shrinks, Dr. Terrelyn and therapist Jen. And hey, you found us on the Gaslit Truth podcast.
Woohoo! So if you haven't already, go back and listen to episode 1, or I'm sorry, not episode 1, but part 1 and part 2 of
Yes.
the medication taper. We were only gonna do 2 parts, but Jen and I get a little geeked up and we end up talking a little too much, and so this turns into 3
Yeah,
episodes for the same thing,
it's
which I
fine.
although it's important because I think people need to understand also not to dissuade you into doing this, but to understand like the detail of what it means to taper because so many people come in and like, what supplements can I take to help me feel better tapering? And how do I taper? And I don't have a 2 sentence answer to that. Because everyone is so
Nope.
bio individual. How long you've been on a medication matters immensely. What medication you've been on matters. All these things, your nutrient depletions matter, how you take care of your body matters, like it matters, it all
All the above.
matters. Yep.
Mhm.
So it's not easy. It's not easy in the sense that it's a little bit more complicated than you probably thought. But I like to believe that Jen and I make it less complicated and we offer you some real solutions that'll help make you feel better faster. So this episode, we're going to talk about the actual taper part.
Yes.
Um, so I'm going to say again, don't just listen to this episode and start your taper. Go back and listen to part 1 and part 2. Okay.
Yes.
Cannot stress that enough.
We'll
All
put them
right.
all in order for you guys. We'll make it real easy. So you just
Yes.
flow
Yes.
from the first one to the second one
We're going to
to
the third
now
one.
the meat of the
Mhm.
third one. So let's
Right.
let's start talking about this taper. Something that Terry and I do is called a hyperbolic taper.
I'm
And
gonna
I have
put hyperbolic taper-ish.
ish. Okay, this would be an ish. And
This is an ish.
before we go farther with that, we have to give a shout out to Mark Horowitz. Mark
Yes.
Horowitz is the gentleman that wrote the Maudsley Deprescribing Guidelines. He is going to be coming on the show.
Woo!
He's coming on,
So
guys.
excited.
We've
He's
got him
coming on.
scheduled, but he is in
Yes.
France right now and he's fucking busy. Okay. So we all just have to be patient. Okay. Until we can get him on the show in a few months. But he's coming, guys. So it's going to be super cool to talk to the man that, I don't know, changed my entire practice. Like it made
Yes.
me like actually change how I see all of the world within deprescribing. So
Mhm.
he wrote a deprescribing guideline that's about getting off antidepressants and benzos, Z drugs, things like that. So Terry and I use this as a guide when we are working with our clients and doing consulting. But I can speak for both of us when I say this is just really truly nothing but a guide because this
Yes.
process is so individual.
Mhm.
I am walking proof of this process being extremely individualized. And I'll give a
Mhm.
few little things along the way as Terry and I talk today about how this had to shape and change. And it does for many of our clients too.
Well, this is why this conversation is important because this is also why there isn't a standardized evidence-based practice
Yes.
for deprescribing because of the individuality and bio-individuality that is required within it.
Mhm.
So if you only had you do this, this, and this, that would be great if everybody responded that way, which is why a lot of prescribers who are trying to deprescribe people don't take in the individual nature. They're like, cut it in half and then do every other day. And
Mhm.
it's not an individual process enough to account for all the
Yeah.
withdrawals that people go through and the debilitation and all those things.
Yeah.
So this Mousley deprescribing guideline is like the next best thing to that, but we also have to make sure that we account for bio-individuality
Mhm.
within that.
So
So
the real like layman's easiest way to talk about the idea of hyperbolic tapering,
mhm,
right, is we are not we're going to talk a lot about antidepressants today. not that there aren't other drugs that we help deprescribe individuals off, but when we're talking about a hyperbolic fashion, it's about looking at how it is that the drug actually interacts with the brain and these receptors of the brain as you slowly start to deplete this drug out of the body. These drugs use a hyperbolic fashion. Okay. The law of mass action comes into play with this, right? So we're really looking at like neurologically how our brains have adapted from being on these drugs and what we have to do in a very low and slow fashion to take them out of the body. Okay.
So that they can readapt to that. It's that exercise and kind of homeostasis that we're
It
talking about.
it is. So
Mhm.
to give you just a little bit of, like, the nerd part of me that I like to explain to my clients, which for some people, this is too much information. For
Yes.
others, they take this and run, and they're like, "This is so fucking fascinating." And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mark Horowitz, and other people too, who there are people out there, Dr. Yosef, they put some really great videos out, guys, which I'm
Yeah.
like, at some point, I need to do one of these. Melissa Pastillo has one out there too, where they draw the graphs for you and they explain what's actually happening. The part I'm going to explain now without a graph for you guys, okay? But it's about neuroadaptation to antidepressants and what happens when you reduce the antidepressants or you stop them. So in the brain, serotonin is released from neurons essentially, right? These presynaptic neurons, and it gets released into the synapse and it activates the receptors, right? On the postsynaptic neurons. So they go from one to the next, right? The serotonin, there's something called a serotonin transporter, okay? And it reuptakes your serotonin, right? And it gives you basically some level of equilibrium. That's what's happening before a medication. Okay.
That's your healthy
That's
brain
your
neuron
good.
action. Yep.
Yay. Okay.
Mhm.
Then we introduce a medication into the brain. Okay.
And fuck it all up.
And we, God damn it, we create. I know you don't want to hear this, but for those of you who are already med harmed and are listening to us because you're like, I'm ready to start deprescribing, you have a synthetic brain injury. And here's
Yep.
the start of the synthetic brain injury, guys. Okay. So we introduce like an antidepressant, and that antidepressant blocks like, 60, 70, 80, up 90%, right, of the serotonin activity, this transporting activity that happens. So what happens is there's less reuptake of that serotonin that's going into that presynaptic space. There's less of it, okay, essentially. So then what does this do? It leads to an increase in our levels of serotonin, which increases the activation of the post receptor, the thing where it's supposed to receive it, right? So
Mhm.
this is once this drug is going in there. So we're actually increasing it. Here we go. Then when drugs are in the body long term and they're in the brain long term, due to homeostasis, which is what Terry just said before, basically our body's space of like we have to even it out. We got to just got to feel good because something's changing, right? Due to that, the excess activation that's happening in the post, I gotta make sure I get this right now. The post
You're right.
synaptic receptor, it leads to down regulating of these receptors. Okay. And it
There's too
actually
much going in. So
too
you
much.
you have only so many receptors for the serotonin molecules, and so it's too much. Mhm.
Down regulates, right? And we know this because there's imaging that has been done of the brain to
Mhm.
see that this is happening. This is how we know, okay? So this can happen for quite a long period of time. So then we move to the very last part of this, which is when we decide that we're going to stop the medication, okay?
Mhm.
So when the antidepressant gets removed or even reduced, okay, after a long-term use, that serotonin transporter starts to be unblocked, and
Yep.
now the serotonin becomes removed from the synaptic area, and it tries to return to these like basic physiological levels. It's trying to get back there. That down regulation, right, of
Call
these
it the
receptors.
sleepy receptor. I'm like, the
Sleepy,
receptors are
yes.
sleepy. Mhm.
They are sleepy, yes. You
Mhm.
always say that. That's a good way to say
Yep.
I gotta use that more because 'cause I'm just too, like, in the stupid words. I need to use
Yeah.
simple words. Like, it's so much easier.
Sleepy. It's
So,
asleep. We need to wake it up. Mhm.
CP night night. So they're all CP night nighting here. That down
Yep.
regulation of that receptor goes on for some time, even after the
Yep.
antidepressant, guys, is starting to be, like, removed, right?
Mhm.
And then the system starts to register these physiological levels of the serotonin, and it's like, what the fuck is going on? And
Mhm.
that is what leads to withdrawal, guys. That is then when we start to experience withdrawal. And these
Well done.
symptoms, they're going to
Mhm.
keep happening, guys,
Yep.
until the body and the brain gets back to a space that was like, as Mark Horowitz puts it in his book, he calls it pre-drug configuration, meaning where we were before we
Before.
synthetically injured our brains. So
Mhm.
there's your
And this
5
is
minutes of like
no, that was
Channel 10
good. I
PBS.
liked it. It
Me and
was
Bob
well
Ross, he
done.
can paint, and I'm just gonna be there talking about the brain.
Well done, Jen. Well done.
Thank you.
There's 2 parts in here that I wanna talk about just briefly.
Sure.
The one is, in the withdrawal. So when your receptors are sleepy, and that's when you're gonna experience the withdrawal, and that's when most people say, I must need the medication, because I'm experiencing this heightened state of what, anxiety or depression,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
And there's a truth in that. Yeah, you do need that medication to keep
Mhm.
the previous homeostasis in place. You're right.
Yes.
But that is not a return
Yes.
of symptoms. And this is
Yep.
what we've been taught to say that, yep, that's a return of your symptoms. There's one way to understand how it's not a return of symptoms by a simple question. The symptomology that you have right now, was it exactly the same as the symptomology you had 25 years ago when you started? And 100% of the time, I can
Yep.
guarantee you the
The
answer
answer is
is no.
yeah.
It's way worse. It's way different. Or
Mhm.
maybe I started as a depressed patient and now I have got this immense anxiety. So it's different. So that's how you know that it's not a
Mhm.
return of symptoms. I also want to address the very beginning stage of when you start taking a medication. As you said, it blocks the reuptake of serotonin, leaving more serotonin out there playing around,
Yep.
building up, right?
Yes.
So when I say, the chemical imbalance hypothesis has been long disputed, and debunked and all the things. And so I'll get this pushback of, then why does it work? I'm like, well, because your neurons now are flooded in the beginning with serotonin. What does that feel like? Anytime you have flooded your system with a neurochemical, it feels different,
Yes.
right? Like, yes, you're going to get sometimes a manic response to
Mhm.
that,
Yep.
which feels good. Like, it
Does
feels
feel
better
good
than
because you
some
were
depression.
so yeah, you
Mhm.
were so damn low.
Yes.
That's like when
So,
people are like, "A stimulant really helped." Well, fuck
well,
yeah, it
yes,
did.
I would
Oh my
probably enjoy a
goodness, right?
stimulant too much.
I'll just
Uh,
love that for a hot second. Yeah,
I know,
but
right?
not for more than a little bit,
No,
because well,
because
here's what
then
happens.
right, because
Yeah,
then the longer you go, the
yeah,
more downregulated those receptors are, and
yeah,
that's the place where you end up getting more medication because
yeah,
you start feeling low, or an additional medication on top, or a new diagnosis. All these things start
yeah,
happening.
yeah.
So I've never said that, an antidepressant doesn't, quote, unquote, "work" in the beginning,
Mhm.
because it does, because it floods you with all those happy chemicals,
Yes.
right? It
Yeah.
works until it doesn't. It works until it turns on you. And those are the people that we're hoping to catch here, because that's when your mental status is going downhill.
Yep.
So anyway, those are the 2 important parts of this process that I
Yes.
think, most people have experienced,
Yeah.
right?
So
Yeah.
knowing that like we were giving a very specific example, and what I was going through is talking a lot about serotonin. Okay, antidepressants, they show this hyperbolic pattern between like the dose and the clinical like symptoms that's happening. Okay, so here's how we get to withdrawal. So the next part, from the brain, right, which is what Terry and I were talking about here. So then the next part of this is what actually is withdrawal. I think we should touch on that because people's perceptions of withdrawal, at least for a lot of my clients that I've worked with, some of them I get like it's like a split. Some of them know what it is because they've been trying this 2 ways from
Oh,
Sunday and
yeah.
have tried so many times to get off of their medication, and they know, they're
Well, hold
the
on.
obvious withdrawal symptoms they
Yes.
know really well. But
Like the
what they
dizziness, the brain zaps, that
the yes, I'm not
disequilibrium,
sleeping,
like,
the
yes.
akathisia. Anybody
Yeah,
who has ever went off of a
sometimes.
medication and had akathisia, which is essentially it's just this restlessness in your body. It's like for me, it was like there was like bugs crawling all the way through me. Had to move, had to move, had to move, had to move. Okay.
Mhm.
Impending doom often comes with akathisia. Had that. Okay.
I still think, Jen, that sometimes akathisia is, looked at it like a return of symptoms. Like
Yes.
that stuff is the anxiety and the
It's
akathisia
crazy
with the
anxiety.
low mood and the
Yep.
wanting to off yourself. That's a return of depression. Like,
Yes.
so I still,
Yeah.
but the obvious ones are I know I'm in withdrawal because I'm dizzy or
Yep.
I have a bobblehead or I have brain zaps. Like
Yep.
those are
Those
obvious.
are obvious. Now, but
Mhm.
there are what I say a lot of like clients that come like have already been through those. But something that I find very interesting is that there were many other as they learn about withdrawal, there are many other symptoms of withdrawal that they had prior to those that they didn't know were withdrawal.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in the vein of us helping you with your hyperbolic taper,
Mhm.
we track symptoms with
Yeah, we do.
people. Like symptom tracking is a huge thing. Data collection is a giant thing.
Yes.
And the reason we do that is, especially, I think about the first time, like, let's say you're going to come in and you're going to do your first reduction, right? Okay. I will say, we're going to do your first reduction. The first one is going to take the longest because I want to make sure that you're not experiencing any withdrawal symptoms at all for weeks before we go
Mhm.
again. In order to do that, though, we need to collect data for a little bit of time, okay, on this first one. And so I'm going to throw Jen under the bus here because I think it was one of your first tapers, and then it was going well for a few weeks. And then suddenly you
Mhm.
were complaining to me that you had a headache. And I said,
Yep.
you need to track that as a thing. And you were kind of like, is it really? It's
Yep.
been a few weeks, so
And
whatever.
it's and here's where it comes from, and I know a lot of people listening right now are gonna go through this. Well, the first, like, couple reductions, I was fine,
Fine, I was
okay?
fine.
And
Yeah.
here's the deal, guys. Yes,
Yeah.
if you're on 20 milligrams of, say, Lexapro, right? For most tapering, like, guides, okay, you actually go down, like, 5
To 10
milligrams right away or
or
down to
to
10
10.
milligrams. That's very common, and that's where this is important to know, and
False sense of security
it's a fault,
happens.
and there's a little science to back it, right? Again, guys, there's this
Yep.
hyperbolic fashion that's happening, and in that this curve that's occurring, okay, the
Mhm.
farther you get in the taper, the more difficult it gets because of all of that obnoxious PBS special I just gave you about the brain, okay,
Yes.
about 10 minutes ago. That's the why. So typically for most tapers, we're looking at the occupancy of serotonin on these receptors. Over time, that changes. So what it looks like when you go in the beginning is very markedly different from the middle versus the end, which is why in the beginning you can take a 5 or even a 10 milligram cut and you're like, "Ah,
Yeah.
I'm
Or
fucking
or
fine."
or I wanna
Oh,
say people that are on, like, Zoloft and they're at 200 milligrams,
yes. Yes.
and they don't feel anything in their
No.
taper for a long time. When I say a long
Yes.
time, like 150,
Mhm.
100,
Yep.
and then suddenly you hit that cert occupancy point, and it goes, "Oh my
Yes.
god."
And
Like,
that's where
that's
there's
where you
some
know.
brain mind fuckery that happens with this,
Yes.
and I will be the yes, you can call me out all day long in this episode because I did it multiple times,
Yep.
because I wasn't paying attention to withdrawal symptoms that I knew they were withdrawal because, I've read about them. I was educated on them, right? Like
Mhm.
Joseph Glenmullen wrote this great book called The Antidepressant Solution. And in there, there's
Yeah.
these charts that I still give to my clients as a
Mhm.
reference, right? And I use
There's like
myself.
100. Isn't there around,
It
like,
uh,
100
the
symptoms or
one
something?
he put out has about 60. It's got
Okay.
about 60 different withdrawal symptoms in it.
Mhm.
And some of these are ones we would never chalk up to withdrawal, guys, which is why we start to like
Mhm.
this is like my Bible, these sheets I have.
Mhm.
They are laminated and they're in my bathroom cabinet. I look at them every day
Great idea.
because
It's a
yeah,
great idea.
I
Mhm.
do. Because here's the deal. Did you know that slight headaches are a symptom of withdrawal? Stomach bloating
Yeah.
and abdominal cramps, diarrhea, okay, are symptoms of withdrawal. Let's say you got a cold and there are symptoms that are mimicking like flu like symptoms, right? Like
Mhm.
you've got aches or pains, or my nose keeps running. Okay.
Yep. Oh, runny
These
nose is on the
Oh
list.
my god.
Yes. Yeah, runny nose.
Nightmares, guys. I all of a
Mhm.
sudden am not sleeping as good. I'm having these kind of crazy, like intense dreams. Maybe not super nightmares, but all of a sudden my dreams are vivid and they're really intense. Okay. These these are symptoms of withdrawal. Now, most people are like, my brain's not zapping.
Mhm.
I don't have suicidal thoughts. Okay,
I'm not
guys, and these are
busy.
the things, yeah,
Mhm.
you're not gonna hurt myself or others. These are the things that your prescribers will say to you to pay attention to, but they are missing, the other 100 symptoms
Mhm.
that people go through, okay? Um, well, you have trouble sleeping. What's that about?
Mhm.
That's actually a
Th
symptom of withdrawal.
This is the exercise in curiosity and not dismissing anything,
No,
okay? So
no.
if you have it, you check it off because it might
Yes,
be really important for your next one. It might
yes.
have an established pattern
Yeah, it's
of
kind of
when it
important, guys.
emerges. Yeah, because here's the thing, and this is where the deprescribing guideline is very important because it maps it out, but this is the individuality piece. So if you know that on week 3 you get a headache,
Yep,
week 3 after your taper, you're definitely not gonna wanna be tapering in
no,
week 4 or even
no.
in week 3, you
So
know?
that's what we do, guys, is we look at the symptoms you have, and you have to be very honest with yourself on this. I
Mhm,
was not many times, which led me to some pretty extreme akathisia and spaces of like I could have been inpatient. No doubt in my mind.
mhm,
Okay. So I laugh about these things, but it's part of my story, and that's just kind of how I am sometimes. But I didn't pay attention, right? And so here
right,
I was going from headaches to so much akathisia that I couldn't walk around my kitchen and be around knives. Okay. That's
right,
reality for
mhm,
me. All right. Now, what we do and we look at is when you have these symptoms, even if it's diarrhea, even if it's like the headaches or my nose won't stop running or my sleep is changing, then what we do is when you have those symptoms of withdrawal, you note them
mhm,
and we do not look at tapering you down until you've went at least a couple weeks
with no
without
symptoms.
those symptoms.
Mhm,
Everyone's different. For me, it takes about 21 to 25 days between each dose reduction for me to have a withdrawal symptom. I don't go down a dose and feel it within 4 or 5 days. I'm
right,
about 2 to 3 weeks later and then I get it. So
which
for
is
me,
which is
I got to
interesting.
wait like a
Yeah.
month between every single dose reduction
Right,
because that's
because
when it comes for me.
so many people will miss a dose, like, when I was on Zoloft, I know I would miss a dose, right? And then the next day, I'd be like, "Bleh," so that's
Yep.
what most people are looking for those immediate responses to
Mhm.
withdrawal,
They are.
and they might not exist, okay?
Well, and it
Especially but
that's I don't mean to interrupt you here, Terry, but
Mhm.
I didn't wanna I'm not gonna go far into this, but it's one of the reasons that we educate our clients also on, like, the half-life of a medication.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Yeah, and
Mhm.
I was like before we prepped here, I was like, we could talk about half-life just really briefly, but your prescribers are gonna talk to you about half-life in terms of, well, the half-life of, say, fluoxetine, right? Prozac, for example, guys, the half-life of that is, like, 4 to 6 days for fluoxetine. It's really long,
Mhm.
okay? And so as compared to some other drugs, right?
Mhm.
It's longer, right? Versus a benzodiazepine, your half-life is a matter of hours for some of them.
Right.
Okay. So
Mhm.
your prescribers are going to tell you that's how long it takes for you to the drugs out of your body. If you haven't experienced withdrawal within that half-life period, you're good to go.
Right.
But we already did the PBS special, and I talked to you all about how this actually works in the brain. So it's a misnomer. Your half life is important to know, though, because you might notice some of those withdrawal effects that can happen right around that, which is why, like for me, okay, I can't go more. I can go a day and miss my Lexapro. I'm okay. It has a little bit
Mhm.
longer of a half life, and that's me personally. I don't experience that, right?
Yep.
And I can miss a dose, and I'm okay, and I'll just take the dose the next day. But so half life does matter for that reason.
Mhm.
Okay. So it's something to know for the drug that you're taking, but where half-life doesn't matter is what's told to you by your prescribers, which is, hey, you've made it, the half-life's done.
It's out of
You
your
don't have
body, you're good
withdrawal,
to go.
you're
Yeah.
good to go. When
Mhm.
in reality, that just means the drug has been expelled from the body, but it now we wait for the brain to do its thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
The getting the drug out of your body is, like, only a smidgen of the battle.
Yeah.
The recuperation of your brain is the
That's it.
biggest piece that you're gonna
I
be
my
dealing with.
example I give people is alcohol. Okay.
Yes. Huge
Use alcohol
example.
as an example. You can go
Mhm.
ahead and you can drink too much, right?
Yep.
And within how many hours, that the alcohol itself is out of the body. But
Yep.
what happens for the next couple days? You're a piece of shit because you're hungover, right?
Right.
The
Right.
brain, right? The half-life, it's out of the body, but now the brain and the body have to do the work from the damage that was done.
Yep.
It's the same thing as these guys.
Mhm.
So half-life matters, but it doesn't matter in the way that I think it's been educated to us sometimes by prescribers because
Mhm.
we're like, well, it's out of the body. We should be good. But it's
Right.
just like alcohol, guys. Same,
Mhm.
same thing.
Yep. And also when we were talking about that cert occup we should have put up that, little graph on the screen, too bad. Anyway, sorry guys, we didn't do it.
All good.
Yeah, that graph part of the screen is, I think, one of the most
I might have
important.
it here. Hang on.
Oh, she might be able to pull
I
it
mean,
up
I have the
there.
book I have the book here, so I could just grab it. Here, let's
Oh,
see.
you could, yeah, you could just throw it up there.
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna try to make this work, guys.
Oh, there it is. Yep, there it
Hang
is.
on.
So
I
you
gotta
can
start
see it,
sharing.
like, there's, like, this plateau across the top, and then the occupancy level starts decreasing and decreasing and decreasing once you hit that curve, okay? Going down. Okay, good. You're good. Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, which is why in the hyperbolic taper, we go slower and slower and slower toward the end. So the ending, here's the caveat for everybody. The ending is the hardest part. So
Yeah.
those last little, what is it, like 10% or something
I
is the
laugh because 'cause I'm like,
hardest. Yes.
"Man,
Yeah, you'd think,
maybe I would have that, but
but this is like,
shit."
you get down to Jen's on 4
I'm at
milligrams or something.
4.3 right now. I
And
got
she's
so long
just
to go
chomping
yet.
at the bit to be done, like, can I just be done?"
Yeah.
And it is so it ca for some people, not all,
Yeah.
obviously, but the last little bit is the hardest part, and you're just
Mhm.
aching to get off of this entirely, but know that you're gonna probably go slower in the end than
Yeah.
you did in the beginning. Like I
Yeah.
said, that beginning drop, like, when you saw the curve was pretty well plateaued.
Yep.
So really anything over, like, let's just say your cert occupancy is 100 milligrams, meaning if you're below 100, you start experiencing withdrawal. If
Mhm.
you're 100 to 200, you don't experience anything. That just means that that's just extra shit rolling around in your brain. That extra stuff didn't really even do much for you, right? It's just all the extra stuff. And then when you start going down, that's when you know that was your most impactful milligram, really, up to like
Yep.
I'm just making numbers up,
Yep.
100, right?
Yeah.
So it gives you that false sense of security off the beginning, but it also gives you a really large sense of hope, right? Like, oh, but sometimes the hope is this was really easy, right? And
Mhm.
then you start
Yep.
going, okay, this is okay. Whoa, that hit me hard. I got to pull back a little bit.
Mhm.
Then you
Yeah.
get to that little bit and you're like, oh man, this is so psychologically hard to keep
It's a
going.
big part of what we work with people on when we're consulting
Yes.
is the psychological piece behind this.
Yep.
That is
Mhm.
that is a
And to
very
not lose motivation because
it's very tough.
there's some people that I've worked with and they get down to that last little bit and they're like, "Maybe I'll just stay on this little bit because it's so hard." And it's like, "Okay, we gotta get going again." Or, I do tell people like, sometimes the working with me isn't about a full taper.
Yep.
Again, I wanna make sure that my clients have that own personal agency again where they can say, I'm just going to hold here for a while and I'll contact you in the
Mhm.
future when I'm ready to finish it off.
Yes.
And that's fine. So even like just a reduction in medication for some people, that's enough, right?
Mhm.
For some
Yeah.
people, I can't push my agenda on you.
Yeah.
But I want them to know that it's either, less is more, or we're going to do the full thing, or we're going to take you off of,
Mhm.
one or two medications and leave you on the other,
Yep.
whatever you want to do, I'm there for it. So,
I think that's important too because
mhm,
people will like consult with me and they'll do a quick consultation and well, I heard you on your
mhm,
social media, right? I've listened to you on the Gaslit Truth, and like I know you're over a year and a half into doing this,
yeah,
and it's not feasible for me to sit and see you once or twice a month, right? For a
mhm,
year and a half. Like
right.
that's like cost wise, right? Like that is not a
Yeah,
thing I can do, right? And so I think it's important. That's one of the first things I tell people is, well, first of all, this is my journey, not yours. So
yes.
everybody is going to be really different than this. And second, we're going to build you up. At least I tell people this. I'm going to resource the shit out of you, give you
Mhm,
everything you need. I'm going to teach you how to listen to yourself. And as you start to go through this taper, you're going to know and learn and have that agency. You're going to know what to do. You
yep.
don't have to stay with me forever. I've got people that come back 3, 4 months later and do a check in and tell me where things are at and ask a
Yeah,
couple questions. And
100%.
that's it. You do not need to, once we get you built and resourced, you'll have the things that you need to keep moving forward
Mhm.
in this. You learn. I've got life events going on right now. For me, that
Yep.
was a big one. I went 3 months and I didn't touch any. I didn't even touch the taper, and I knew it. What I wasn't going to,
Yep.
because I had so many things going on in my life that I knew weren't going to be optimal. It was the middle of winter in this godforsaken state we live in. I don't know, I'm still here. That doesn't help. So
Nope.
I paused, and I learned. You learn when to pause, when to go. You learn if you went too fast, and if you have to reinstate, which is going back up to where you were,
We
which
try hard not to
we
do
try
that.
not to do
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
There's this thing called the kindling effect. You can look that up, guys.
Mhm.
Which can be a dangerous space. However, for some people, I've had to do it a couple times because
Yep.
the withdrawal was so bad, and it was 2 solid weeks of it, and it was too much for
Mhm.
me. So I went back up. Of course, I got better within like 24 hours.
Yeah. That's another reason you
Sucks.
know it's withdrawal.
It
You
is,
instantly get
yeah.
better and you're
But
like,
you instant
"Oh,
within like a day or 2, you're
yeah,
back. But
yep,
it's very individualized. So we teach you how to get to that space, because I don't know about you, Terry, but I'm not in the business of creating forever consumers. That's just not my
no,
shtick. Could
no,
we be? Hell yeah.
sure."
You wanna stay with me for 3 years and see me every
Yeah,
2, 3 weeks and pay out of pocket for that and do that? Fine, but guess what? I fine, maybe
right.
some people do, but for most of us, I don't want that. I wanna we wanna teach people how to
Mhm,
really listen to yourself
mhm,
and do this yourself. We'll
yep.
get you there, and you just check in.
Yeah, and I like to tell people too, like, when I'm working with you, I like to keep communication open because if I'm not seeing you for 4 more weeks or
Mhm.
even longer because like Jen, she held for 3 months or whatever, I'm not gonna see you while you're holding. Like,
No.
let's set that appointment for April then, you know?
Yep.
But if you're doing something and you have a question that's small, you know what? Just ask it. Do not wait for April to roll around to ask,
Mhm.
should I take this B complex? Like, what the
Right.
fuck? Just
Yeah.
ask me the question, you know? So I like to be able to have that type of touch point support as
Yes.
needed.
Yes.
And I will tell you that, there's people like, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," whatever. And I'm like, I have yet to have somebody abuse that with me.
Yeah.
Because I think most people are conditioned to not unless it's really important, you know?
Mhm.
So I'm not really worried about that stuff because I
Mhm.
want to know that you're also being very supported by me.
And
So
and and most people
mm,
don't. They're not
no,
right and left, like, going through things, asking crazy questions, like,
no.
they're not.
Mm-mm.
It's usually, like, legitimate things that they just wanna know something about. I get a
Right.
lot of people who communicate just to go, "Hey, I just found this article, you might wanna
Yeah.
read this." Like, I get more of that because 'cause I'm
I get memes
constantly
sent to me
I
constantly.
I know. I'm constantly getting more of that kind of stuff,
Yes.
like, "Hey, I was on JAMA and I read this article. Have you
Yeah.
seen this?" And I'm like, "Oh my god," and then I'll take that and give it to other
Interesting.
clients. It's so
Yeah.
fantastic because it's just this community of sharing resources, which ends up happening
Yeah.
too, which is pretty damn cool. So,
And I will tell
um,
you that, I think Jen and I, every time we work with someone, we learn something new.
oh, yes.
Because no one person is the same. And also, I've had an influx of people coming in, very complicated psychiatric medication stacking and stuff like
Yeah, a lot of
that.
lot of
And
polypharmacy. Yeah.
polypharmacy is a huge thing, so
Yeah.
and a lot of health related concerns on top of it, like, so I'm learning sometimes at the same pace as my clients are, and I'm constantly having to relearn what I thought I knew already,
Mhm.
because it's never the same thing twice.
Yeah.
So as people will have questions like, "Well, is this normal? Is that normal?" I'm like, well, if it's happening to you, then it's normal for you. Yep. I'm
Yeah.
like
Yes.
I don't know. Not everybody's gonna experience that, but if you are, then that is your normal. So
Yes.
that's where we're at.
Yeah.
And that's that individual piece of all of this that I think can be missing. And it is kind of missing in the book. There's no way you can account in this book for bio individuality and just in
Not at all.
life
Nope.
experiences and things like that. So this book is a great guide,
It's a
like Jen
tool.
said in the beginning.
Yep.
It's a tool, it's a
It is
guide,
a tool.
it's
Yeah.
great education to give to your prescriber. I
They love it when you bring it to the
oh,
appointment and you tap on the
yeah.
book and you show them the charts.
And then they ignore it and
I
do
know.
their
They
own thing
they
anyway.
love that. I know. I'll tell Mark all about that when he comes on the show. I'm just like,
For
"You have no idea."
sure.
Like, I brought that book right in there with all my tabs and all my notes and
Yep.
everything, and I was like,
100%.
"See?
Jen
Here."
has exchanged her DSM for the Maudsley prescribing guidelines.
I know. Well, but if you guys have stayed this far with us, this was
Mhm.
the end of what was supposed
Yeah.
to be a 2, but a 3-part series. I swear to God, we're not gonna do part 4. I mean, unless we get a bunch of people that like, if we get
Right.
feedback that like, because anytime you guys give us feedback of like topics that you're interested in us doing or talking more about, we take that into account. And so if it
Mhm.
makes sense for us, we'll add it in and we can resource and add it in. But this, I think we can say this is three
We are
parts.
done. Yeah.
Here's the end of our 3-part series.
If you need more, just work with us
Yeah, I
individually and
mean,
we'll give
you
you all the
could
things.
shoot us an email. I'm
That's right.
looking to deprescribe,
Mhm.
and yes, we will work with
We'll do it.
you and help you through this. But this is the end of a 3-part series. If you haven't catch the whole thing, okay, as we wrap up the first piece of deprescribing is that 90-day warm up. Eat, sleep, move, meditate. Get your freaking lifestyle dialed in before we get going. Then you actually move into the second part of deprescribing, which is you've got your taper team. You're maybe doing some functional lab work. We're looking at nutrient depletions. Maybe there's some amino acids or supplements that we need to bring into the game. Okay. And then we move our way to the actual part of looking at what could we do for deprescribing? How could it look? What types of guides can we use? What could your actual hyperbolic taper look like? Um, and that's our hustle. This is what we do.
Yeah. And so the next part would be setting your free consultation. So there you go.
Shameless self promotion. Here we
Shameless
go. So
self-promotion.
you know what? You can send us your Gaslit Truth stories, or you can email us and just say,
Yes,
"Hey, I want to deprescribe with you at the Gaslit Truth podcast at
that's right.
gmail.com." You can find Terry and I anywhere that you go on any of our socials. We're there. You can listen to this podcast anywhere that you listen to your podcast and give us 5 stars because you know what? We're trying to save the world one
We
deprescribing
deserve
client at a
every
time. So
star. Yes.
damn yeah. So thank you everybody for staying with us and listening to 3-part series and stay curious. How's that?
All right. Have a good one.